Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
Hello everyone, this is episode 8 of Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars. I am Greg Srizavasti.
And I am Matt Levitz.
For those that you don't know, Matt Levitz is the more professional of the two. He's more insightful and he's
And Greg is better looking.
Oh, that's not true either. So, no, that's true. You're smart.
Either.
No, you're smart. Can you cut the either? Cut the either. Cut the either. No, you're
so Greg was lying and I was lying.
Oh. Touche. Like that.
All right.
I like this episode as I like every episode. This is a great choice, Matt. Good job on this. Groundhog Day. Yeah. I had a great time listening to these interviews because I have not seen this movie since it was released.
Oh, I have.
Okay, so you've seen this.
I took my kids. They showed it in movie theaters. So we saw it with an audience just a couple of years ago. And great fun. My kids loved it. And then also I took my kids to see the Broadway show in New York, but that's another story.
Oh, I'm an idiot. I had no idea that they had a Broadway version of Groundhog Day.
Yeah. It closed early. It wasn't a huge success, which is too bad. It was fun. Music by Tim Minchin, who's one of my favorite composers.
Oh, wow.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the 1993 movie starring Bill Murray. And in fact, we are going to hear from Bill Murray at the end of the show, but first we will have Chris Elliott, Andie MacDowell, and Harold Ramis. Before we get to all that, though...
Oh, no, we have something not as important.
Well, it's Junket Talk. We do Junket Talk every episode.
We do Junket. I wonder when does the Junket Talk end? How many?
When we run out of stories.
I wonder when we're going to run out of stories. This is a good story. The topic of this episode is swag, also known as tchotchkes, also known as payoffs. Were they payoffs?
Well, not exactly. We weren't writing reviews.
Right.
So they didn't really need to buy our affection. But they gave us free stuff, and we enjoyed it.
Listeners, one of the things that was the allure of attending these press junkets, I guess for a lot of people, including myself, was the free stuff that they would give either before or after the press junket. We would leave the respective hotel after doing the interviews with pretty much a bag or just a bag filled with stuff. At the worst, we'd probably get a T-shirt or two from the experience.
It wasn't every junket. There were a lot of interviews where we didn't get anything. But yeah, we would get T-shirts, we would get bags, always with the name of the movie on them. Sometimes we would get toys. In fact, I've got one right here. You guys can't see, but I'm pointing. You see what I'm pointing, Greg?
Oh, Turbo Man. Listeners, Matt Levitz is pointing to Turbo Man. Turbo Man...
Jingle All the Way.
It was from the Jingle All the Way junket. Very good pull, Matt.
Yes, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in fact, I have that junket digitized so we can do it.
Okay.
In a future episode, we had Schwarzenegger, we have Phil Hartman.
Yes.
Definitely worth doing. So I think we'll probably program that pretty soon. But since we're talking swag, yes, they gave us Turbo Man dolls, which the movie was about the quest to get this hot toy for Christmas, and all the stores were sold out and all the adventures that Arnold Schwarzenegger goes through. But it wasn't so hard for us. They handed them out at the junket. We each got one. And I think they're collectibles now.
Oh, very good, yeah.
I believe they're very hard to get, and mine is still mint in the box. So I could probably put that on eBay. Speaking of eBay, I think some people would sell their swag.
I have no recollection of prior events, but I would say...
I'm not naming names.
I'm not going to name names myself. What people would do is sell press kits, sometimes shirts, collectibles taken from the junkets. I'm sure they still do that now.
Now, was this eBay or were there stores that would take it?
Back in the day, it was eBay. eBay was a big pop before Amazon became...
Okay.
The god, king, and queen of everything. It was eBay was a big part of the junketeers. They would sell their wares on eBay.
I never did that. I would usually give them away to friends. Especially the T-shirts. They seem to be pretty popular, and I don't wear T-shirts with designs on them, with words or pictures. I'm much more boring than that. But
why would you do that?
I don't know. But there were
That's
always
weird.
There were always family members and friends who would be happy to get the shirts.
Swag story, Matt.
Sure.
Which you can cut out if it's boring. I mean that. I was actually wearing a Flintstones junket shirt. I was walking to my local 24 Hour Fitness.
Yep.
Someone drove by me and said, "I want that shirt."
Really?
And I was a little bit creeped out. And I go, "Yeah, it's just for the junket. I just covered it." And he goes, "Man, I really want that shirt."
Well, you couldn't buy these things in stores.
Okay, I was a little bit freaked out. He said, "I'll pay you $20 for that shirt." And I said, "I'm wearing it. It's in the sun. It probably has my sweat in." He goes, "No, I want that shirt." I took off. I'm not making this up. I took off my Flintstone shirt.
Yep.
Obviously, I was hard up on cash. I got the 20. He got the shirt and he left.
Yeah, but then was your bail like over $20 for indecent exposure?
No, I went back to the car, put on another shirt, which I had.
Oh, good.
And I worked out. I got sweaty. I probably had pneumonia that day, but it's fine. I got $20 out of the transaction. That's my little swag story.
That is a swag story.
So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. So what do you recall as some of the other gifts that we would get?
One of my favorite gifts was from the Addams Family Values. There was this snow globe where it had the hand of, I don't know, one of the characters, the bald guy.
Well, remember in the Addams Family, there was a hand that was disembodied.
Oh, right. That's it. The hand that was disembodied was holding the snow globe of the Addams Family Values.
Thing, right?
Yeah. Yes, thing, yes. So they actually gave us that. That was probably one of the standout junket items I received.
Yeah, I didn't really keep anything, and I'm kind of sorry now that I didn't, because I think that they'd probably be worth a bit. But I mean, I'm kind of looking around my office now, and this is all stuff I bought. There really isn't any junket stuff here except for Turbo Man.
Right. I think the Matrix gave away stuff. You know what? My dad, my late father, used to use the Enemy of the State junket briefcase. It was like a silver briefcase.
Now that you mention that, I believe that my dad used the Pelican briefcase.
Wow. Yeah.
So we both gave briefcases to our dads. How cool is that?
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
The other thing that I remember is the gifts weren't always equal, because there was kind of a hierarchy. And
I just remembered that. My
TV
gosh.
people always got the best gifts.
Well, no, we still got good gifts, though. Let's preface that.
Of course. But a lot of times they would get more, or sometimes they got them and we didn't. I mean, if they didn't make enough for everybody, you knew that it was the TV people who were going to get them.
Of course, right.
And I think the idea was that we just wouldn't know. And so, we wouldn't miss what we didn't know about. But everybody talked to each other, and we all saw each other at screenings, and people would wear things in the hallways. So, of course, we knew. And for me personally, I didn't really care, but there were people in the junket group who would throw temper tantrums.
Yes.
I mean,
they would get mad. They would get really mad.
If I'm remembering this right, I think there was a junketeer who was not allowed to go to Disney junkets anymore because he yelled at a publicist over not getting a T-shirt.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
I remember someone not being allowed at a Disney junket, but I don't know if that was the root of the cause.
I think it was.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, we're talking 25 years ago. It's hard to remember for sure. But,
right.
But I definitely remember people being really upset over the stuff they didn't get. And I do remember them yelling at publicists, which is not fair at all.
Well, this doesn't really, maybe this is another episode and maybe I'm just really stealing this idea, but another part of the swag was the swag that we got as part of our reporting, meaning the press kits. A lot of times we'd have celebrities sign pictures
and that
or press
wasn't
kits.
Swag per se. That was part of what we needed to do the job.
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, we're not talking press kits right now, but it's since you bring it up, these were the days before the internet.
Yeah.
And so there was no place to look up who we were going to interview and to get their previous films, their credits. Some people would clip magazine articles or whatever and have files on people, but a lot of times with these interviews you were just going by the seat of your pants. But we did have the press kits that they gave us, and the press kits were kind of a cheat sheet of here's a bunch of things that you can ask questions about, and sometimes it would be pre-interviews, like they've talked to these actors months earlier and they put their best stories into the press kit. So when you read it, you say, okay, they've got a really good story about this and about this. And that would help us. Then we would ask questions, because we would already know there's a story there.
Right, yeah.
So that wasn't really swag so much as a tool that we needed to do our jobs in the days before the internet.
They would become kind of swags when some junketeers, some interviewers would ask for autographs, and the press kit itself would become something that would be sold on eBay. I never did that.
Yeah, I only asked for autographs a couple of times on
here.
very, very special occasions, and I don't have them anymore. I don't know where they were, but for the most part, I didn't feel comfortable doing it because we were all on an even plane working together to create this interview. They were giving the answers, we were asking the questions, and we were all level. And the minute you ask for an autograph, it puts them on a pedestal, and suddenly we're fans and they're stars, and it's not level anymore.
Yeah, some people don't have that problem. I agree with you on that case. So, so that's our swag thing, swag talk.
Yes, time to move to the movie.
To the great Groundhog Day movie, which still holds up.
And our first interview is Chris Elliott. So, do you want to do IMDb stuff, or you want me to just jump in?
Jump in.
Okay. So, some of the things that most people know him from, of course, there's Something About Mary, Everybody Loves Raymond, Eagle Heart on Adult Swim, and in more recent years, he played Lily's father on How I Met Your Mother, and he's currently acting in Schitt's Creek.
Right.
Now, some history about him. Chris is the son of Bob Elliott, who was an actor and a comedian going back to the 1950s, and one half of the comedy duo of Bob and Ray. Chris is also the father of Abby Elliott from Saturday Night Live.
Whom I have since interviewed.
Have you?
Over the years, yeah.
So, to give you some perspective, at the time of this interview, Abby was 5.5 years old. And he even refers to her. He talks about his girls at home. And so that's who he's talking about, Abby Elliott from Saturday Night Live in much later years. And interesting point, Chris Elliott was a member of Saturday Night Live, I think, for 1 year. I don't know how many fathers and daughters have been in that cast, but they are one.
And both of them had short runs. I think she was there for maybe 2 seasons at the most over at SNL.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It wasn't that long, and she's not on anymore. Anyway, Chris got his start on the David Letterman show, and he was doing recurring comedy bits. So it makes sense that Barry Kretschik asked him what was going on with Letterman at the time, because you have to remember this junket took place in January 1993, so less than a year had passed since Jay Leno had been given The Tonight Show over Letterman. And Letterman had just announced that he was going to leave NBC and move to CBS, but he hadn't done it yet when these interviews took place. So that's where we are in TV history at the time of this interview. Something else you need to know, from 1990 to 1992, Chris had starred for 2 seasons on a sitcom called Get a Life. So he talks a little bit about that. And the very first thing you're going to hear is Chris reacting to somebody pinning a lavalier microphone onto his shirt. Most of our microphones were giant things in mic stands sitting on a table, but every now and then someone would come in and they would need a lavalier microphone pinned to the shirt. So that would be the first thing that they do.
Did you ever do that, the lavalier stuff?
No, never did a lavalier.
I did the lavalier a bunch of times.
So you got to manhandle the talent.
Yes, so to speak. I did a horrible job at that, like with a lot of things.
It happens sometimes, and it happened with Chris Elliott. So he makes some references. So that's what he's saying, so you understand right at the very beginning here.
And yeah, you know, a little bit of teaser for the Chris Elliott interview. If you want, like Matt was saying, if you want a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at his relationship and friendship with Letterman and linking Letterman and working with Bill Murray together for Groundhog Day, there's a lot of that stuff as well with Chris in the interview.
Yep. So enjoy. Here we go.
Here we go.
Chris Elliott.
Is that your
What the hell are you doing? Thank you.
How's that feel?
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. That's right.
We've had so many varying descriptions of Bill Murray: passionate artist, devoted golfer, but is surrounded by dirty laundry at home.
So you talked to
opposites
Trevor
attract.
Albert.
So what's Bill Murray really like? You must be able to tell me that.
He walks, he seems to float off the ground when he walks. He's ethereal. That's the way I would describe Bill. There's something very ethereal about the guy. I don't know how else to say it about him. He's a regular, down-to-earth, blue-collar, funny guy, but there's something very, almost in a way, spiritual about the guy. He is sort of deep, in a sense. I had a great time just being around him and just sort of watching him, because he's just a funny guy. You know, he's a funny guy that you like to sort of just observe, sometimes at a distance, and sometimes you like to be part of it too. But
what do you see when you observe him? What do you learn?
Well, he sort of was an idol of mine since I was about 15. So I kind of feel like a lot of the stuff that I do, not necessarily in Groundhog Day, but the stuff that I have been doing in my career is sort of versions of what Bill has done in certain ways. And so I don't think he sees it. Somebody once told me that that's what all comedians do. They sort of absorb what other comedians do, and then it translates differently. To me it feels like, oh, I might be ripping him off when I do something, although it looks completely different to somebody else. So every time I see him do stuff, I sort of absorb what he does. I'm not sure I could pinpoint what it is, other than to say, he's sort of in your face. He's always either, wants to play cards or get you going, doing something, get you into a character or get you doing something with him, so he's sort of always sort of on the attack.
So what were some of the sort of on-set antics that you two kids would get into?
He taught me how to play Crazy Eights. And that was it.
To what degree, we talked a lot about the improvisation in the film. To what are there any lines that are yours that we should take note of?
I don't even know. My part in the film, there wasn't a lot of room to sort of do that because the movie doesn't really revolve around my character. So it was hard to sort of stop the movie for me to say something goofy or stop the plot. Bill did an awful lot of ad-libbing. I would say about 20% of his scenes are, whether that happens when he shoots or 2 weeks before when he's reading the script, he'll ad-lib and say, no, this is a better line than that, and he'll do that.
The line that struck me as a very Chris Elliott kind of line. Did he refer to himself as the talent?
No, I think that was in the script. That was definitely in the script. It may have been in after they cast me, but in the script.
What were some of the valuable things that your dad taught you about comedy?
I think he probably, without me knowing it, taught me a certain degree about timing in comedy, if to get specific. I see a lot of my sort of rhythms and timing is very similar to what my dad, his timing, especially early on when he was about my age. I've viewed over and over again a lot of his old 1952, 53 TV shows when he was about my age, and a lot of the stuff they did back then was different than the later Bob and Ray stuff. It wasn't the sort of sit-down interview, slow talker of America, that sort of stuff. It was more a little weirder in a sense, and it was closer to my sort of stuff. And I think we also sort of had the same kind of attack on comedy. The subject matter is different, but I think we have sort of the same things make us laugh.
What are some things?
Embarrassing pauses are probably, and that's probably, what he taught me the most was just sort of, to get a laugh, in between lines, which is how I got on Late Night, was sort of just, making Dave laugh by just sort of staring at him, in between something, and he liked that.
Yeah, see, what's funny about you isn't always what you say, it's just the way you are.
Yeah, I think I got that from my dad. That's definitely my dad.
Did you become an expert at operating that video camera?
It was funny. They had an expert on the film to show me all the things I had to do with this camera, and he spent like 2 days with me, so that I would learn how to actually use this camera. And then I saw the movie, and I'm just holding the thing like this. I knew how to unload it, how to load it, how to put the batteries in, how to focus it, how to turn it on, and all that. None of that made it on. And actually, the first 2 days of shooting, the real camera it pinched a nerve in my shoulder, and they had to gut it and get a light camera because I'm such a wimp. Nice. Andie MacDowell, she won't admit this, I bet, but when I first met her, I was actually working with that expert on the camera, and she came down and was talking. She started talking to me, and I think she thought I was the cameraman for the movie at the time. I'm not sure.
Now, when you were the teen pinup guy, was that like a joke, or how did you get them to do that?
That was in Teen. Was it in Teen Beat or?
I don't recall.
It was one of the hunk magazines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a joke. They were sort of in on it. I called them, or my agent at the time did, and said, Chris would like to be a pinup, and they said sure. And So I went and I got some photos taken with, my shirt unbuttoned down to my navel and, a big head of hair, and, wrote "Love Chris" on the poster, the pull-out poster, and I got a lot of letters from 12-year-olds. It was funny.
Yeah, that's an exciting moment.
Yeah, it's very nice to have now.
How close did you get to the groundhogs? Keep it safe and respectful.
I did. Bill actually got bitten by one, but I didn't have to get too close. I got very close to the stuffed ones, maybe a little too close to some of the stuffed ones, but I stayed away from the live ones.
What were you thinking about when, for the past month and a half, the whole Letterman deal was being played out in the press? What was your take on this whole thing?
I was actually somewhat. A year ago, I would have said Dave was going to end up at the Tonight Show, and then up until a month ago, I would have said Dave's just going to end up at NBC. He's going to stay. So I was a little surprised. There were very little information was coming out of the 14th floor where late night is in the Rockefeller Center, and even to people that worked on the show, no one really knew which way Dave was going to go.
You think money? It's kind of hard to turn down.
Well, I'm sure that had quite a bit to do with it. I think also, just the time slot. I think mainly, Dave really wanted to move into 11:30, and it's time for him to too. After 10 years.
What about the ongoing controversy about whether that's his audience at 11:30?
Well, maybe the demographics would prove me wrong, but to me it seems like that is his audience now. I think, in 1982 when Late Night first went on the air, I wouldn't say that was his audience, but now after 10 years, Late Night has sort of grown into that time slot. It's not the same show that it was in 1983. I don't stay up till 12:30 anymore. I've got 2 kids. So I think he'll get back a lot of the early audience actually that are now lawyers and doctors that have kids and families and so forth.
It's also a show that's Late Night impacted down the line. The
right.
stuff on the Tonight Show, etc.
Right.
Wouldn't have happened pre-Letterman.
Right. That's absolutely true. There's a lot of influence in what Jay's doing from Late Night.
One of the CBS executives say, "I don't think the Letterman's audience takes a nap for 1 hour."
That's true.
Yes, I enjoyed him at 12:30, but I just can't possibly watch it.
Yeah, no, it's this generation's turn at that slot, and I think that's that makes sense.
Did you predict? Some people have certain goals in life and have a career, and they have their plan, their path. Doing what you're doing now, is it going along the path that you had expected, or?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to write comedy. I knew that from about the time I was about 15 on, and at the time I think I wanted to be an actor too, and I early on realized I couldn't do that, and so this basically, I am sort of living out the dream that I had, when I was 15, plus the fact that, I'm somewhat recognizable, which is an added aspect of it, which I never really dreamed of. I never thought I would go that far, that I'd be a performer.
When you became I'm talking prime time, I would imagine your celebrity became a little bit larger.
Yeah, it did. I was amazed. At, within a week that Get a Life was on the air, just the people that just recognize you on the street, And it was a completely different audience than Late Night. It was like 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds, that never, that had never seen Late Night at all.
They identify with the paper.
Right, yeah. They read Teen Beat.
Did you feel any pressure then that your father had been so successful and that you were going to be compared to him? It sounds like from what you said earlier that wasn't, that it was more admiration.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had a feeling of that. I'm always sort of concerned whether or not he likes my stuff, but it, I'm so different, I think, ultimately, than what my dad is, and I was saying before, I even early on when I first started at Late Night, I never had the worry that I'm going to ruin his name by doing this really weird stuff, because the early audience that was watching Late Night was not my dad's audience, and then if a few of my dad's audience actually saw me, they would never put 2 and 2 together and think, oh, this guy has to be an Elliott, he has to be related to Bob Elliott. So that never worried me. you know, Get a Life was interesting because I think my dad was doing stuff that I don't think he had ever done before. You know, he was just doing sort of playing straight man to his son, which was pretty odd experience.
I mean, does he?
No, you know, it was such an sort of show busy world. There was never any. He's almost sort of embarrassed by what he does for a living, and I am to a degree too. There was never sitting around a table talking about, what did you think about the way I did that line? How was that? You know, and I think you could have held another beat for you. You know, there's just it wasn't that way, or sort of.
Do you have a favorite routine or stick of your dad's character?
I have a lot. I mean, I like, you know, Wally Ballou is just a favorite character. So anything he did, Lee Ballou, yes, anything he did. But you know, it's interesting to me that anything Lee Ballou did was funny to me. You know, whether it was the Cranberry thing or anything else. So I can't say that I have a favorite routine. I just have favorite characters that I like to see them do pop up.
Any radio arts belong to your dad?
No, it's is that Larry Josephson? I think is those are the cassettes that they put out. Yeah, he's Larry Josephson puts those together.
Suppose you and your dad had a free evening, and you wanted to watch something. What would you two watch that would crack you both up?
Laurel and Hardy, probably.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's probably we would rent a Laurel and Hardy tape and put it on. That's a middle ground. You know, sitcoms we differ. You know, he's a Murphy Brown person, I'm a Simpsons person. You know, but if we had to find something that we could both laugh at, it would be Laurel and Hardy.
What kind of actor are you? I've been sitting here trying to think. What kind of script would you read and think, yeah, that's a Chris Elliott part? What would that be?
You know, I don't consider myself an actor, so if it was a Chris Elliott part, it would have to be something I wrote for myself or somebody else wrote for me. You know, I don't think that I'm the kind of guy that you can put into things. You know, I'm at least not at this point in my career. You know.
How did you get put into this?
Harold and Trevor knew me from Get a Life and from Late Night. I came in and just begged to be in it because I was a big fan of Bill's, and so they put me in it.
Works?
I find begging in this business is
groveling.
Yeah, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Quite effective.
But you described Bill, you know, I mean, everybody's saying his spiritual side. That sort of seems a little the antithesis of what you'd expect under the facade of...
Well, he's gotten older, too. I mean, you know, I think in the early days of Saturday Night, there was that whole, you know, feel that those guys were, you know, mad dogs and you know, getting, you know, drunk and going out and partying and all that. And you know, maybe it was that way. I don't know. But those days are certainly long gone. You know, Bill's a family man with 2 kids and stuff. And he reads an awful lot. And, you know, I think that sort of, you know, I think at this point in his career, you know, he's able to pull off the stuff that he can pull off in this movie. You know, I don't obviously people, you know, weren't ready for it in Razor's Edge, or he wasn't able to do it. You know, I think he definitely does it in this movie. Which, you know, I wasn't around when he shot those scenes with Andie, the sort of more intimate bedroom scenes, or the more sort of sentimental scenes where he really had to be different than the persona, you know, the Bill persona. And I was amazed. I was very pleasantly surprised that he could pull it off so well. So I think he's matured and he's found that sort of whatever that is.
How old are you, Chris?
32.
And what are you doing next?
I'm actually going to shoot a movie beginning in March called Cabin Boy, which is written and directed by Adam Resnick, who wrote and produced Get a Life, and it's being produced by Tim Burton and Denise DeNovi.
So is the next thing for you? You want to be in more movies?
I don't know. You know, I sort of like TV better than movies, in a way. I like the kind of disposable aspect of TV. I like just sort of doing stuff, you know, good or bad, and throwing it away and then doing something else the next week.
Because you must continue to think of characters that would be funny, because you about every 2 months or so, your characters would recite
yeah.
So what do you do with all of those thoughts?
Well, I've sort of, you're talking about the stuff on Late Night, the sort of different, I think the interesting thing is I never thought of those guys as characters, like the conspiracy guy or the fugitive guy or the guy under the seats or the panicky guy. I always thought there was one character, which was this persona, Chris Elliott, who was a staff member trying to get on TV. And that sort of even moved into Get a Life. It was almost, you know, for a few fans who realized it, it was almost like Chris Elliott has moved from trying to get on late night to trying to get into prime time, and now that same persona is trying to get into movies. So
What
it's
about
sort of,
Brando?
Brando was still me. It was still me, sort of doing you know, a bad impersonation. You know, I guess that had another layer, you know, because the impersonation was so bizarre.
It was very strange. The best was when you held up the picture of Michael Jackson. It's so
All right,
cute.
isn't she beautiful? Yeah. I liked when I brought Paul the little cowboy suit and the little boots and the little hat.
At what point does one go over the top in a Brando impression?
You mentioned about Bill being an idol. You're in a position, and you have been in a position growing up, where you might meet some of the quote-unquote celebrities and have impressions, and maybe they're idols to you, and then maybe either be shot down after you met them, or
Right.
everything lived up to. How does that affect? I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I knew exactly what Bill was going to be like. You know, I guess having met him before, and also just sort of my own instinct, I knew, you know, what the experience would be like. I had also worked with his brother Brian on Get a Life, so I was sort of aware of the Murray mystique. It was very much like sort of working with Dave for me. You know, it was kind of like working with a guy you sort of idolize and look up to, who kind of kids around with you like a kid brother and likes you, and but you know, also always sort of keeps you at a distance, but is somewhat protective in a way. You know, I mean, Bill may say, I wasn't thinking anything like that about Chris, but that's the way I sort of felt. You know, it was very similar to working with Dave. There was also this feeling like, oh, I want to do good for this guy, you know, or I want to make him laugh, and that sort of thing.
Is it difficult to be on, you know, like you said, or have the right line, or?
No, because I don't think I work that way. I've never been, you know, sort of a Robin Williams comedian or even any stand-up. I've never been sort of a one-liner stand-up comedian. I've sort of just been, like I said before, a guy who just kind of stares and gets a laugh.
What do you think?
Optical comedy.
That's right. It doesn't work on the radio.
What do you think of the Larry Sanders Show? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have seen it. I think it's pretty funny. I think it's very well done, and I also think it works on a lot of levels. It's neat that it works to an audience that isn't aware of, you know, talk shows, and then it's kind of cool just for all the people that have worked on talk shows, you know, to see a show about, you know, what goes on there, because it's very close, you know, obviously.
What's the biggest backstage secret you can tell us that wouldn't be too scandalous to reveal?
Dave has had a chin implant, a nose job, and and he wears a weave. Well, most people know about the weave.
Oh, man.
Come on, tell us something.
Paul Schaefer's getting plugs put in.
No one will ever notice that.
There's quite a difference between seeing one of your shows come back on a 21-inch screen and seeing yourself 34 feet high, especially when you're not sure, I guess, whether it will really play until you sit down in a dark theater with an audience.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, so far I've just sort of waded into the movie industry. I haven't really jumped full blast into a big movie. I mean, Cabin Boy stars me, so my face will be up there rather large. It's hard for me to watch, obviously. You know, I'm not used to it yet at all. You know, I'm also not used to acting for that medium yet, you know. So it does take a little getting used to. I wasn't used to working on television, you know. I hadn't done anything, and so my sort of training ground was actually on the air, you know, was watching myself on TV at night or on monitors while I was doing stuff, so. Yeah, I think it'll take me a while before I get the hang of it.
And what's Cabin Boy about?
It's sort of a parody of Captain's Courageous / The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad combined. It's about a rich kid who gets on the wrong boat with a bunch of fat-ass fishermen, and they end up in kind of a mysterious Ray Harryhausen-esque world. So.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
So now we're back, and my question to you, Matt, is, were you ever a fan of Get a Life, or more importantly, Cabin Boy, because that's a movie I remember actually back in 93, 94. It was 94, 95, actually 94, 95, getting a VHS copy of Cabin Boy to review and refusing to review that VHS because I said to myself, I'm not going to review this POS movie with Chris Elliott, but I have a feeling I missed the boat on his comedic genius back then.
I have not seen Cabin Boy. I can tell you about Get a Life because I was an extra on the pilot episode of that show. And I actually spent a day at Magic Mountain just going on rides with him. But they were the kiddie rides. That was kind of the joke. Yeah, I mean, if you find that pilot episode, just you can look for me.
Oh, very cool.
But I don't really have any memories about it. And I didn't watch the show after that. Oh. So I can't really say.
Way to support his career, Matt.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, he talked about Cabin Boy. It came out a year later in January 1994, and it made $3.7 million from a budget of $18 million.
My goodness, that much it cost?
Yeah, it cost $18 million, made $3.7, and Chris Elliott has not starred in any movies since. But he still works very steadily, and we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
He did talk about enjoying the Larry Sanders Show just as a fan, and he wound up guest starring on it 2 years later. So that's pretty cool. It's also kind of funny. He specifically named Murphy Brown as not really being his kind of TV show. He said his dad liked it, but he's more of a Simpsons man.
Right.
Well, a few years later, he wound up guest starring on Murphy Brown. He played Murphy's agent Steve, so hopefully she hadn't heard that he wasn't a fan.
He probably just said, oh, my dad's a huge fan of your show.
Yeah, probably. Or maybe he had developed a taste for it by then.
Yeah.
So anyway, unless you have anything more to say about Chris Elliott.
Well, that's it. I have never seen Schitt's Creek either. We can say that word, by the way, because it's the way it's spelled, actually. It's spelled in a different manner. But I've always wanted to see more of Chris Elliott stuff. He seems like a very funny guy. He mentions in the interview his impersonation of Marlon Brando on Letterman, and I think that's a highlight of his.
Yeah. No, I remember that. I remember watching him doing that, and it was so funny because he didn't dress up like Brando. He didn't try to do a Brando joke. He was just himself saying, I'm Marlon Brando, and that was the whole joke. That was the whole impression.
Well, props to you, Chris Elliott. Now we are off with Andie MacDowell, and again, I was not at this junket. I found, we're talking about refreshing interviews. Look, this was over 20 years ago, and it's hard to find more frank interviews from actresses than this piece with Andie MacDowell.
Yep. I don't know whether we said the date. This junket took place January 29th, 1993.
93. Okay. One of my takeaways was how awesome the director Peter Weir was. Her director for Green Card. And listeners, if you haven't seen a lot of Peter Weir films, he directed Witness, this movie Fearless. He's The Year of Living Dangerously with Mel Gibson. He's a really interesting filmmaker, but the fact that he was the only director she could name who did not tell her to lose weight for her respective role in a movie was shocking to me, and I now have much more respect for Peter Weir.
Yeah, and she doesn't need to lose weight.
Right, she doesn't. But the fact that it was such an issue for her with other directors, it's brought up in the interview, and the fact that she's also not caught up in the Hollywood system or the game, that she was actually creating a different life for her and her husband and her children outside of the Hollywood system was also encouraging to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great interview, and we hope you guys enjoy it. So here's Andie MacDowell.
Let's just put it this way. No one in this room is as funny as Bill.
Yeah, we have okay.
They've been trying.
Did y'all already talk to Bill or something?
No, we just been waiting. Just the Groundhog.
We had each other.
You're already in this mood.
Yeah. It looks fine. Okay. Me too.
God.
Did you wear the right clothes?
I'm wired.
Read my lips. Can you talk a little bit about bonding with Bill at that first meeting? I mean, you know.
I have to read. What did they put? Everybody.
Well, they put that you two bonded instantly. You were seen together on and off the set.
And you hit each other.
And the Groundhog was with you, you know.
That's what they put?
No, just kidding. They said you had an instant rapport or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I've been a big fan of Bill's forever, so it's really hard not to like him. He's hysterical and he's witty, and you know, he's just, I don't know. I think even at the audition, I just really liked him. You know, he's funny, and then he would do very bizarre things. Before I actually got the job, he would call my house and leave messages for me, like, "Do you drive a stick shift?" You know, and stuff like this. He's just, you know, how many people do you meet that do things like that?
Doesn't it get a little hard to keep your focus, though, sometimes? I mean, because he also is notorious for ad-libbing and
no, I don't think so.
improvising and everything else?
No, just relax and have a good time. That's the best way, I think, to work with Bill. He gave me very bizarre birthday presents, too.
Like what?
He gave me this huge, gigantic box, wrapped, this huge box. And it was full of, he went to like, there was a local store, sort of like a supply store, like a farming supply store. He bought me a belt to wear for building, like, you know, to carry my hammer, and mud flaps for my car with Yosemite Sam, and those things that whistle in the front of your car if you have to. I live in the country, he knows that. So, to scare away deer, a magnetic key holder, you know, stuff like that.
Hardware. Nothing says love like hardware.
Oh,
did you use any of
it? Yeah, I haven't gotten the mud flaps put on yet, but I really do like them. They're great mud flaps, and I need to get the whistle things on, and the belt that holds the hammer and all that. Actually, my husband has worn so much that he needs to get a new one. So.
That's a good guess. Huh?
Yeah, it was a good guess.
What did you get him?
Well, it wasn't his birthday.
Oh, that was his birthday.
You didn't give him anything, Andy?
No, it wasn't his birthday. I gave him a hard time. Some slaps in the face.
Can you talk about your experience working on this film? Just, you know, a general overview.
It was a great movie to work on. It was like one of those situations where everybody's nice. I had a really nice house. The producer was very kind, made sure that they arranged things very nicely. They found me a school for my kids. It was 5 minutes away. It was the best school. It was a Montessori school. They found me a stable where I could ride. The people in the neighborhood were really nice. The people in town were all very nice. So you got to live a really normal life. And, you know, I went on Friday nights to the Pizza Hut with my kids and had a pitcher of beer. And
did you do any work?
I have 2 kids. Huh?
Did you do any work? Or just
Oh, yeah, I did work. We froze to death, too. But, I mean, there were, you know, some hard times. But it was always easy because if you're well taken care of, then everything goes so much nicer. And Harold always had a smile on his face no matter what. You know, the scenes when we're in the van, they actually are pulling you. Have you ever watched how they do those scenes? They actually have another car pull you. And all the rest of them, and the camera and the equipment and all the stuff are back here, and it's wet and it's cold. And they're outside, and of course we're in the van, we got the heat on, you know. Plus I've got my coat on still, you know. God, and Harold was smiling the whole time. And it was the most bizarre thing. He's just got such a good spirit. 3 in the morning, he's happy, never yells at anybody. Because, you know, once in a while you work with these directors that can be really mean.
Since you had to keep, the scenes were quite similar in that it was the same setting and close to the same dialogue, did you sometimes forget which scene you were in? Or because there were so many similarities, the scenes kept somewhat repeating themselves?
Not really. It was really very stimulating. It was really interesting because you didn't have the opportunity, you didn't get bored. You know, it was not like you were, it was just fun. Like the bar scene, for instance, really sticks out in my mind as something that we did scene after scene after scene, but adjusted for each moment, and it was just great fun because, you know, it starts off with him just being so hideous, you know, and so you have the opportunity to respond to that, and then he changes to almost getting everything right because he's learned, you know, and you have to respond to, oh, this guy is kind of interesting, you know, and then you have to respond to someone who just blows your mind and says everything that you would want somebody to say. So it was really kind of fun to have the opportunity to change. It was interesting.
After Broadcast News and even Murphy Brown, you were the nicest, sweetest, most understanding, kind, loving TV producer I've ever seen. Did you think about that?
Well, you have to understand she's new, too. I don't know how many years she would go on being that kind and understanding, and patient.
You mentioned in the notes, or somebody has you saying that only Bill can evolve in the movie, which implies you don't. Did that have any special problems with your character? Not evolving. Yeah, in some ways it was kind of hard because I always had to remember that I didn't learn anything because every day was brand new and fresh for me. So I didn't really go anywhere. My only evolvement was when he would evolve, would be my reactions to his evolving.
but I still had to remain the same person because it was all the same day for me. I wasn't going anywhere, where he was having time and process to actually change, and my character had to really stay in the same day, but just react to a whole different person and adjust for it all to happen in one day.
But it does point out how one day can affect one person.
Exactly.
You react totally differently to one set of stimuli than you do
from something else, and it's all in one day.
Okay, can you talk about slapping Bill?
Oh, that was fun. That was great fun. Love slapping Bill. He's just the kind of guy you want to slap, anyway. So I got to slap him a lot.
Well, did he really egg you on and say, come on, Andy?
Oh, he didn't really egg me on, but he wanted to be right. That scene where, this is just typical Bill, the scene where he ate all that food, I mean, there's other actors that would fake it and say, I can't do this, or, whatever, I'm not going to do this. No, he ate all that food. That's just Bill. He wants it all to be real.
Well, did you hold back a little bit on the slap at the beginning? And then?
I think in the beginning I was a little worried. I had slapped someone previously, and they were always very concerned. You have to be very careful not to slap them near the ear, because you can make them deaf. You can actually hurt your ear. So that's the only important part, is just avoid the ear. But he wanted me to really slap him, so I slapped him. Oh, everybody was enjoying it, though.
How many times did you slap him?
I don't know. Endless. Lots, many days, many slaps.
Did you ever see Scrooge?
Yeah.
He's hurt very badly in Scrooge.
You said he's very kind and generous in his own way. What does that mean?
Who, Bill?
Yeah.
Well, he's got, like most comedians, I think there's a really sharp side to him, but there's also a very gentle side to Bill, and he's very considerate. I mean, he does a lot of improv, and he has his own way of acting, and he has to find his own way of acting, but he never steps on you as an actor. He never stepped on me or kept me from feeling that I was not able to add my own part or to do what I needed to do. Is encouraging in that way.
Andie, what was it like? I've talked to a lot of ex-models who became actresses. They said it was really tough because people tended to discriminate against them. Was it like that for you?
I think in the beginning, before Sex Lies, it was. There was a period where people were not willing to take any chances, or just were not really sure what I was about. But after Sex Lies, I haven't had any problems since then.
But you also read a lot about supermodels with eating problems like anorexia and bulimia and all the rest of it. You seem to come through pretty much unscathed from that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, to tell you the honest truth, I think that this is anorexia and bulimia with actresses too. I think the whole setup that women are being presented, even in movies, is not very helpful towards women in general. I'm real frustrated. I know where I live, I can separate myself and live a normal life, and I eat very healthy. I don't have neurotic problems. I don't I don't work out 2 hours a day and just eat vegetables. Let's put it that way. But then when I come into the business, there's so many people that are setting up this kind of body for women, even in this business. I think it's extremely frustrating in both businesses. I get frustrated. I've had lots of conversations with people about this, and I've had producers tell me to lose weight and tell me I was fat when I wasn't, because they want me to look like a girl, and I'm a woman. And it's very hard for women nowadays. I think it's hideous. I don't read articles about men talking about them working out 3 hours a day and eating just vegetables. It's a subject matter that disturbs me, as you can see.
Disturbed, are we? No.
I get very angry about this.
When they tell you that, what do you say?
It's hard. What am I going to say? I'm working for them, and they're paying me, and they have a perspective on how they want me to look, and of course it affects me. I don't. Thank God, I've never been bulimic or anorexic, and I enjoy life and food too much. But you know what I do? I try to do my best. I work out real hard and try to eat sensibly. But I think it's a shame that I had one director that hired me. When Peter Weir hired me, I weighed 138 pounds. I'm 5'8", so maybe I'm by the charts. I'm fine. I'm in there. I'm in my weight. But by the way we're supposed to look, maybe I look 5 pounds overweight or something like that. But he was the only director that told me, says, please don't lose weight. I couldn't believe it. It's the first time anybody ever said that to me. He said, please don't lose weight. Oh, God, what a relief. It was wonderful. It was just, you know, it was but his perspective is completely different. He told me that when he was in Hollywood, he hated the conversations that they would have about women. When they would go, isn't she hot? Isn't she a fox? Oh, she's hot stuff. And he was completely disturbed by the way women were spoken of. And he has, you know, a very good relationship with his wife. He's very intelligent and has much more to offer than the way she looks. And his daughter is a very healthy girl and not a skinny-looking little thing. And his perspective on life is completely different.
What about nudity? That's another subject that female actresses have told me. If they refuse to do nudity, they don't work.
I don't think that's necessarily true, though the majority of the scripts that I read do call for some nudity. But the thing that frustrates me, it's not so much about doing the nudity. Say Kevin Costner, doing his nude scene, or it's how it's done. That wonderful movie where the man does the nude scene when he's out with all the wolves. It's how it's done, but most of the time the scenes that I see and the scenes that are written, I think are demeaning, personally, to women. And that we have a double standard here that nobody's really ready to face or to deal with. And that's what I find disturbing. It's not really so much that I find it terrible, the human body, something vulgar. It's how it's done that disturbs me.
How are you going to affect a change? Do you feel that you can affect any change in Hollywood? And if you feel you can, how are you going to do it?
I certainly don't think that I can change Hollywood by myself, but I will tell you that I've had loads of conversations with women where I live, and I think that there's a general feeling in the public now that they are frustrated with the way things are being presented for women. I know I've had lots of conversations with women about the problems with weight and the way that they're forced to always be skinny and look like girls in order to be acceptable, and this is a subject that's been written about in the last few years. And I think it's, you know, it's the more it's written about and talked about, the better things can become. And also the way women are presented in movies, I think is a subject matter that a lot of women are concerned about. So hopefully, you know, things will get better.
Getting back to the movie for a second, did you bond with the Groundhog?
Oh, they were, you know, I'm an animal lover, but I think groundhogs are one of the most disgusting animals I've ever come in contact with. They're really not very cuddly. They're pretty wiry, kind of screechy, and very nervous creatures. And I've been around a lot of wild animals, and they're not one of my most favorites, I must say. But
You didn't get bitten.
and I didn't get bitten. They're not real easy to handle. There's not that many really tame. They have kind of a hard time getting tame groundhogs.
Is that how they do the festival every year? They just put the groundhog in a box and then they let him out? I mean, I thought it was maybe more realistic,
I didn't go to the festival, so the person that you can ask that question that could really answer it good for you is Harold and Bill, because they both really went to Punxsutawney. I know that they were pretty good about doing their homework, and I think they probably wanted to present it. They made the knob look as closely as they could to the real knob, and they did the ceremony, and they visited with them, and they went there. So I think it's as closely done as it probably could be done. I don't know.
So there's just three guys who decide whether or not the guy saw his shadow. That's the end of that.
I suppose. But somebody else was telling me this morning, I talked with a reporter who actually did work as a reporter on local groundhogs. So I guess there's other places besides Punxsutawney that actually cover the groundhog. So maybe different people have different ways. But he actually went to a zoo. I know. He went to He went to the zoo to do it, which I find less romantic. At least it's on this knob with all this celebration. That sounds kind of a tradition and a kind of romantic tradition, more so than going to a zoo.
The press material said Bill got a lot of opportunity to improvise A, did you also, and B, how did you respond to his improvisations?
I just had to relax and be ready for whatever Bill wanted to do. It wasn't that complex or anything. It's not like I had Bill's role where I had the opportunity to always be making up new lines and being the comedian. I was really basically the straight person, but I also had to be flexible and be ready for whatever he had to say, but that just makes acting more interesting.
Like Gina and Holly, did you go to a TV station to find out what it was really like before you did the movie?
They brought in a woman who talked to me about exactly what to do, how to hold, what I would be carrying with me, what I would be preparing, and how I would think. So I did a little bit of preparation, but I didn't really think that it was necessary for me that wasn't for me the most important part of my role.
What was?
Just being able to respond to Bill and being able to stay that same person, because I had to stay in one day, and being able to grow and change with him as he changed. For me, that was the most interesting part.
And is that why you took the role?
I took the role because I loved Harold Ramis and I loved Bill. I'm a big fan of his. I've seen all of his movies, and I just think he's great and he's hysterical. And it was a movie that had no violence and no sex, and I could take my father to it. And occasionally it's nice to work on a movie that you can show your kids, and my kids can see this movie. So,
how old are they now?
There's 3 and there's 6.
3 and 6.
How do they feel about you being on the screen?
It's kind of hard for him. My son just started this, where I live, they have a children's theater, and he's done 2 productions this year, and he really enjoys acting, even though he didn't really do a main part, he just did a little part. But the whole process that they do there is very interesting. They have some very talented people in this theater group, and just the exercises that they do with the kids and the freedom that they give them to be creative is really interesting. And I think from this experience, he understands a little bit more of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. He has a hard time with people saying sorry, saying your mom's a movie star or something like that. We don't really have that kind of situation. We have a real home, and people know who I am. And whenever it's brought up, he gets kind of weirded out a little bit. But
what does your husband do?
He built our house that we're living in now, and we own a ranch, and we're ranching. He really enjoys building houses, and we hope to kind of do this together. He wants to build another house and try to sell it.
Give him a tool belt.
We need another tool belt because it's worn out.
Are you in North Carolina?
In Montana.
Oh, in Montana.
There are no ranches in North Carolina.
There's farms.
Yeah.
Should I let you de-wire me so I don't get anything?
Just take them with you. Take them with you.
Okay.
And another project that you're starting?
I don't know. I have to have another thing. I have 2 other movies that are coming out, Shortcuts and Ruby Car. I don't know what I'm doing next. I'm trying to find something. I've been real busy with my family this year, though, because we moved into my house. All right, thank you. Have a nice day. Can I take one of these?
Thank you.
Take 2.
Okay, so we're back with Andie MacDowell. I have an interesting little factoid for you, Matt. Andie MacDowell, during the interview, she was talking about her husband was building homes, and they were, carving out a life together.
Yeah.
That was her first husband, Peter, and they had a daughter. One of their children, her name is Margaret, and Margaret Qualley, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, Margaret Qualley, she actually was the lead last year in this film called Novitiate, where she played a nun.
Really?
And yeah, Margaret Qualley is actually an up-and-coming actress. She was also in The Nice Guys as well. So little
saw that.
Yeah, little postscript regarding Andie MacDowell's career. So
okay then.
Yeah, and she's also, I think she was also seeing this. She's had a steady career since then.
You mean Andie?
Andie MacDowell. She's had a steady career since Groundhog Day, but around the time of that, the 90s, like you were mentioning, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and she was also in Bad Girls, which I don't know if you're going to dig up that tape, back in 1994.
Right.
That was a year later. Did you know? Did you do the press junket for Bad Girls?
I did not.
Hopefully you can dig that up in your archive in the LEG Productions. That junket was held in San Antonio, Texas. We're now off to doing some stuff with the director and writer, co-writer, or just the director?
Just the director.
Just the director, Harold Ramis.
I think it was Danny Rubin who wrote it.
Danny Rubin who wrote it. Harold Ramis is next up. He also mentions doing a little bit of a touch-up on Danny Rubin's script with Groundhog Day.
Well, there's quite a bit to set up with this one because of their relationship. Harold Ramis made 6 films with Bill Murray. They acted together in Stripes and, of course, the 2 Ghostbusters movies. And Ramis co-wrote Meatballs and directed Caddyshack. But it was their 6th movie together, Groundhog Day, this one, that destroyed their friendship. And there are rumors about why, and you can find them on the internet, and there's nothing official, so I don't think we really want to get into that. We would just be repeating one side of it or the other, and we don't know. We weren't there. What matters is that the movie was a hit, so they had that, but it didn't fix anything, and they never did work together again. And, in fact, they didn't speak for 21 years, until Murray came to visit Ramis on his deathbed, shortly before Ramis died in 2014, of autoimmune inflammatory vasculitis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, you have to remember when you listen to these next 2 interviews, which is Ramis and also Bill Murray, that their friendship was already over. But nobody else knew it yet, and they certainly weren't talking about that while they were promoting the film. Plus, Ramis was probably hoping that this would just blow over and they'd be fine, so he wouldn't have wanted to say anything to make things worse. But every now and then, if you really pay attention, you're going to hear little hints of it here and there. And, for example, in all their other collaborations, the 2 of them worked on the script together. You know, every time that they were making a movie together, they would put their heads together and fix the things that needed to be a little bit better. They didn't do that on this one. On this one, Bill Murray refused to write with him. So Ramis sent the screenwriter, Danny Rubin, to go work with him. And then when Ramis would call to check on their progress, Murray wouldn't answer the phone. So things were pretty tense.
And that's why Ramis really referred to that relationship between Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis as a My Favorite Year callback, which, listeners, if you don't know, that's the Peter O'Toole film in which the young kid is under the tutelage of this older actor who has flights of fancy, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you remember in the last interview, Andie MacDowell said that Ramis and Murray had gone to Puxatawny together because I think she believed that that's what had happened, and maybe that's even what they told the cast and the crew, but that's not what happened.
Yes.
They did not go together, and so you're going to hear all about that. Anyways, a bit of subtext in this one. Again, just remember their friendship is over, but they're pretending that it's not. So we have the luxury of hindsight now that it's so many years later and we know what happened with the rest of the story. So it's pretty interesting. You got anything more that you need to add?
No, great stuff, Matt. So here's an interview with the late, great Harold Ramis.
Well, a few thousand microphones. Works for Bill Clinton.
But these are professional microphones.
Wrong.
Various levels.
Strictly amateur.
Okay. Is that Andie's water?
You want to drink it, don't you?
Were her lips on here?
Yeah, I think they were. I think they were.
Excuse me.
Didn't you go to Washington University?
Yeah.
What years?
Are you from St. Louis?
Yeah, I interviewed you on the phone one time.
What's your name?
Joke on you, Harry Ham.
No. What was the joke?
Well, you were talking about your ex-wife. So family still isn't it. So you said, please don't bring her up.
Yeah.
And I said, fine. Then when we start the interview, we start off by saying things like we were on the air, and we said, Harold Ramis, of course, is from St. Louis, where after a bitter divorce, he left town. A fine young St. Louis girl, and you were going, whoa, wait.
Thanks a lot for that.
That was years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, you're from East St. Louis.
Yeah.
What year did you
I'm not from St. Louis. I'm from Chicago.
The idea
when did you get to
in '66.
Okay. The idea of you and Bill going to Punxsutawney to the real festival seems almost funnier than the movie.
I didn't go. I missed that.
You
I
said that you had been there.
No, I sent him and Danny Rubin, the writer.
Oh, you didn't go.
Danny did a tremendous service for us when we went into pre-production. I knew Bill would be going crazy with pre-shooting anxiety, so I sent Danny to sort of be his Sancho Panza and not only revise the script, but just sort of get into the experience with Bill. And Bill dragged him around, and I think they chartered a Learjet and flew from San Francisco to Punxsutawney.
You said you just asked. You knew that he would have the pre-shoot jitters.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've worked with him.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? Like, can you explain what you're talking about?
Oh, Bill's a reluctant actor. He's extremely careful about the way he lives his life. On the surface, he's very careless, but I think he's probably deep down a perfectionist. And he aspires to a kind of moral and spiritual perfection. I mean, The Razor's Edge was a real concept for Bill, not just a movie he did. I mean, this is a guy who's trying to make every day of his life as extraordinary as possible and be as true as he possibly can to his feelings and values. So it's very hard for him to commit to material because he's like any comedian, you know, no one wants to look bad. No actor wants to look bad. And in comedy, it's so easy to look bad. So he never fully, I think it's hard for him to fully trust the written material. It's hard to fully trust his directors, and so I'm not saying he's a nervous guy, you know, he's not nervous, but I think he needed to know that things were progressing along the right lines, both from a production point of view and from a creative point of view with the script. So I think for Danny Rubin, it was a little bit like my favorite year. You know, the young kid being sent to take care of the wildly temperamental star, you know, who led him on this incredible adventure.
Is the way that the Groundhog comes out in the movie the way he comes out in real life?
That's pretty much the way it's done in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. What you saw is, except it happens earlier in the morning. I didn't want to start the movie in the dark. So we took the liberty of having the sun already up at 6 in the morning. But they do it, people, just as the sun is coming up, the groundhog is pulled from his fake stump and held up to a screaming crowd. And it's even rowdier than we depicted it. They play a lot of like rock and roll music, 50s rock and roll and early Beatles and Elvis tunes, and the crowd just sort of dances for a long time before, and people, there's an open mic. People come up on the stage and say whatever they want, you know. I'm from Wilkes-Barre, and we're happy to be in Punxsutawney, and everybody cheers, you know. Or, I'm from Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity, and you know, at University of Pennsylvania, everybody cheers, you know. It's like, so it's a very folksy kind of festival, which they take with as lightly as the movie does.
Given the way you both started in improv, plus Bill's propensity for ad-libbing, is it a surprise every day on the set? Is it a surprise in every scene?
Yes, it is. It works with, it starts with us agreeing on a written script as far as we can get it. At a certain point, you have to start shooting the movie, whether you like every word in your script or not. And then there's the daily process. Then we did a little rehearsal where we at least identify areas that we think need work, or where or identify the things that we think already work. And then you start with a rehearsal at the beginning of each scene, which is really kind of a walkthrough with the script to find out where it's working and where it isn't, and how that integrates into the shooting of the scene. And having loosely established how the scene will be shot, then you go off and really start hammering away at the dialogue or honing the script, and then you come back to shoot it. And that's really, my guess is this is how most movies get made. That's where it really happens, is when everything's set and the crew has done all the lighting and everyone's fussed around enough with the makeup and the wardrobe, and finally, after hours of waiting, the actor and the director have their moment where the actor starts laying it down, take after take, and you say, no, try it this way, try it that way. Change dialogue, drop that line, you know, and then you have the luxury of editing, of course. So if you've covered yourself really well enough in the shots you've got, then you can virtually pick and choose what you want to use.
So does he ever do the same take the same way twice? Or?
Not really, no. Which can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it's hard to remember what you did. You do a reading that you really liked, and I know this as an actor myself, and then you just cannot get back to it. Fortunately, we have video assist now, which is a way to replay the scene you've just done.
Did you make any major changes in the script once you started working on it?
Once I started working on it? After Danny's original?
Right.
Yeah, there were some pretty big things.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, Danny's original script had caught the character Phil already repeating the day. You met a guy who woke up, seemed to know everything that was going to happen, spoke along with the radio, answered people's questions before they're asked, knew which puddles to step over, punched a guy out of the blue without knowing why. And he told us in voiceover narration what was going on. And that seemed to, for me, that would force the audience to try to catch up with the movie. It seemed like I wanted to at least try writing it in a linear way, so we got to discover it along with the character And it seemed that it would give us a chance to enjoy seeing his first reaction to this thing happening, which was, of course, not seen by starting further downstream. The other thing is we tried for a while to explain why this was happening to him. The studio originally wanted to know, is it some kind of curse? Is it some cosmic thing? Is it an ancient legend? You know, and I didn't want to. Really didn't want to characterize the movie as being a science fiction movie or a movie about witchcraft or about a curse or anything like that. And it also seemed that if we did that, if we had a mechanical setup, then it would require a mechanical solution. You know, once you've created a problem, you then have to solve it. So it just seemed the existential approach always seemed better to us. And when Mark Canton took over Columbia, he said, "You don't need it," and we dropped the curse, and that was the end of it. And I was very happy to drop it.
So the curse was the first idea. There was some sort of a curse or something.
They wanted something, and we wrote in a curse. You know, there was a curse.
What was the curse?
Yeah, there was a woman at the station he'd been sleeping with, but just before going to Punxsutawney, he's telling her he doesn't really want to see her anymore. And her eyes, I described her as, her eyes are a little too wide open. You know, she's like, there's something wrong with this woman. And then as he's going up to Punxsutawney, it was intercut with her, with a book called 101 Curses You Can Do at Home. 101 curses, spells, and hexes you can do at home. And she's got chicken feet, and she's got some strange powders and herbs, and a picture of him, and a wristwatch. And she throws it all in a bowl and pours some oil on it and smashes the watch, puts it in there, and sets the whole thing on fire in this little bowl. And then we would dissolve to Bill, you know, waking up. And
did you shoot that?
No.
Never got to shoot.
No.
Why'd you choose Sonny and Cher?
That was in Danny's original.
Was it?
Of all the songs you wouldn't want to hear every morning of your life, you know, that seemed to qualify.
It worked very well.
Yeah. Well, which is a good point, because when you play with tedium as a device, you have to worry about what point do you cross the line, and does the movie truly become tedious for the audience? And in fact, in our audience, the recruited screenings, that was, you know, a negative comment we would see from some of the audience, that they were actually succumbing to the real boredom of it, you know. So we had to do a lot of judicious editing to keep the theme, obviously, and the story intact, but not let it get so boring that people would go over the edge.
Since it cuts ahead while remaining in the same day, how many times does he, or do you know how many times does he actually relive the same day? It seems like over 100.
Over 100, yeah. In my mind, 5 years even. More than a year. In Danny's original script, 1,000 years.
Long enough to become a good piano player.
A very good piano player. Yeah.
You talked about existentialism. Is this did any of the studio executives, they probably don't read Sartre, but
no, they have.
Did they ever say, well, in Sartre's No Exit, these people are in hell and they have to live forever with the same small group of people and they can never escape? Did anyone ever tell you that he should die first and be a Sartre-style existentialist hell?
No, none of them made suggestions that explicit, and they don't really talk about Sartre in your studio production meetings. You know, Nietzsche doesn't come up very often either. But I would say to them, when they were telling me, oh, you got to put in some kind of curse, I was saying, yeah, but Nietzsche had this idea of eternal recurrence, and they, yeah, fine, all right. So, yeah, they didn't address it on that level.
As existentialism, certainly, based on.
But there are still executives who, in fact, Columbia's foreign department is a little worried about how it's going to do. Not so much in the West, but in the third world, that the existential approach might not work. These are countries where magic is more palpable for people. A curse would not be so outlandish for them, you know. So.
You say Bill's persona sort of embodies the best and worst in people. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the best and the worst in the press notes over here.
In the what?
In these little press materials they gave us over here.
Yeah?
There's a Harold Ramis
his character?
quote.
The character of Phil.
Well, you talk about Bill, like the character of Bill, his persona.
I was probably referring to Bill's the character Phil.
Well, let's just
Maybe his
Yeah.
ability to encompass that in not only this role but other roles too.
Yeah. Well, he, like I say, he is a strange combination of anarchy and discipline. I mean, here's a guy who, can fall asleep in just about any circumstance or position or time of day. He seems like completely lethargic, and yet he'll bounce up from a nap and go run 8 miles. But he won't run 8 miles every day like some people will. He'll do it 3 times a year, or he'll seem like a complete I don't know first if he's gonna hate this. I'd go visit him at home, and for some reason all his laundry is on the bed and on the floor. I mean like a ton of laundry. So he seems like a complete personal mess, and yet he's totally devoted to golf, which is one of the most obsessive and compulsive games in the world. So he's this. It's all opposites with him. He's extremely physical, yet he's extremely tender. He's a playboy and a family man, and when I say playboy, I don't mean he's out carousing, but he's like a loyal husband and father, and yet he's probably great bar hopping, with the guys until all hours of the night. Not that I ever would, of course.
When you made Animal House in 1978, you make a movie, or you wrote it. I think about selling it to the public. You want them to enjoy it. How has comedy changed as far as its acceptance in 78 to 92? Because the world's undergone a lot of different things, and some of your movies don't seem to be affected by it.
Well, comedy's always been around, and probably what works about any great film, comedy or not, that has survived is that it must appeal to people on some deeper social or mythological level. I mean, when you tap into those great myths that have motivated society from the beginning, you're onto something. And I know what I laughed at when I was a kid, and it's not that different from what I laugh at now. If I look at Preston Sturges films today, they seem as witty now and contemporary in their outlook and sophisticated as they did then. And sometimes we're very careful not to date the things we do, because they may be around a very long time. There's only one topical reference in this movie. I think it's to Willard Scott. And that's very conscious. We filter out references to other contemporary media. It even extends to not wanting to put in music that's too contemporary, because that people might not be hearing rap music in 5 years. If you want to date a movie, just put in music that's exactly current. Suddenly it's like seeing bell bottoms on an actor, or wide lapels or fat ties. I was watching The Deep in my room this morning, and just looking at the suits, there's something. But this movie, it seemed like it could be in any decade, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. It just there was a kind of timelessness about the story, and we tried to keep that even in the look and the decor of the film.
There's a couple lines in this movie that are almost like odes to previous movies you've done.
Yeah.
If you could pick them out. And,
what are?
Be the Hat.
Oh, Be the Hat.
Maybe when he stuffs the food all the way in his mouth. Maybe an ode to Animal House or something like that.
Yeah.
Is it very difficult for you as a comedy writer to filter? I mean, do you have a computer where you put like little things? I got to put this in a movie one day. And I mean, how do you come up with these writing sketches, scenes? Like, where does it come?
It's a combination of just method and planning and technique, and versus inspiration, instinct. Just everything comes from somewhere else.
Is it a thing like you'll be having dinner with your family and something funny happens? Will you write it down, or no?
I have a pretty good memory for.
Excuse me, you're pulling your cord. You're about to.
Oh, sorry. I'm fiddling as I always do.
My memory for important things is good. I mean, that's sometimes the test of an idea, is if you can remember it without writing it down. It's probably a good idea.
Did Bill invent some of the stuff? Like, did he say, I gotta have a chance to commit suicide, or the food, or any of that? Or
the suicides, I think I can claim for myself. Letting the Groundhog drive the truck, Bill.
How was that achieved?
That careful training. The groundhogs we learned they can't really be trained, but they can be somewhat tamed. They conditioned this. They have a natural grasping reflex. So when they put him up on the wheel, they found he wanted to grab onto it just for stability. And then if they fed him a banana, that he would stay there as long as it took him to eat the banana.
Did he in fact bite Bill with you?
Twice in that shot.
What happened?
Oh man, we made the mistake we shot for like a couple of hours with the groundhog in the truck, and I think he was so sick of being towed back and forth up that road. By the time we got him out and put him on the wheel, his tolerance level was way down, and Bill very bravely kept trying to. Every time the groundhog would try to get off the wheel, Bill would pull him back and put him back on, and finally Scooter had enough and took a chunk out of Bill's finger through the glove. In fact, bit right through the glove. They have very long incisors, you know. But generally, I thought they were kind of not horrible little creatures. They're big and they can be mean. We had 5 babies that my little son, who's about 2.5, really fell in love with, and they would crawl on his, you know, so I'd put him on his shoulders and stuff. They were kind of sweet.
Especially when you want rodents crawling on your child.
No, they don't seem like mice or rats. They're more substantial, you know. So.
At what point? One of the things I liked in the movie very much was the 7 sets of montages, the slap montage, the suicide montage. Was that in the script, or did it develop later, or in editing?
The slapping was a later idea, not in editing, but in the later stages of the screenwriting process. I thought we wanted to indicate him striking out. I think we were already shooting when I had that idea. That I thought, well, what could we repeat to show that he kept trying that night, even after the first manipulation failed? And she slaps him the first time. Well, the easy way to show that he kept trying it was to just go to the slap each time, you know. Except for the one where he tries the snowball fight again. And one of my funniest things I've ever seen him do, and I don't even know if that plays for audiences, but when he tries to recapture the exact angle and look in the eyes on the ground when he falls down on the ground with her. I thought he was just so funny doing that. And, but then the slaps follow that, and it seemed to be a real good device.
Harold, you do everything. You do producing, acting, directing. What's the best part about your business, and what's the worst?
Of the things that I do, directing is the best part of it, because for me you get to use more of yourself than any other thing, any other aspect of the business. And it's not so much having the power or getting the glory, because I think directors are sometimes overlooked. You know, people perceive a movie as being the actor's movie. You know, this is a Bill Murray movie. I mean, people will see it that way, and my wife, you know, thinks it's a Harold Ramis movie. You know, so you know. Someone said some great things. Mike Nichols once said he liked directing because he liked being in the service of so many people. And in a way, you think you're going to be running the show, but in fact, you're there to support all these other people who are doing. You hire the best people you can, and then if you're smart, you listen to them. You know, you let them do what they know how to do, and you make judicious choices, you know, along the way. I love collaborating with people. I'm gregarious. I like working with people. So being a director, it's nice to be out there all the time and getting to shape something. And as I said, it's so comprehensive. You get to work off both your writing skills and your own acting skills in helping the actors, and your own sense of the look and feeling and pace. The editing is extremely interesting. I'm somewhat musical. I like the scoring of the film, the choosing temp music, and then recording the score, working with the composer. George Fenton was great on this one. I even co-wrote the rock and roll song at the beginning of the movie with George. We wrote the lyrics together.
There must be something you don't like.
Yeah, what's the worst?
The worst part?
Yeah.
Writing, because you're doing it alone in a room. It's all great when it works, and it's all miserable when it doesn't. That's really what it comes down to.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we're back. That was Harold Ramis. Now, before the interview, we talked about how the friendship was already over at the time that this junket happened.
Right.
And I said you can listen for little elements of subtext here and there where they kind of give away what's really going on. There's one moment that I wanted to point out in particular. Did you notice when Shep Morgan asked him about working with Bill Murray, and he asked, "Is it a surprise every day on the set?" Ramis gave this laugh that spoke volumes. I mean, really, it said everything that he wasn't saying out loud about how tough Murray was to work with on the film. And then he went on to give his prepared answer, but that laugh was all about the stuff he wasn't saying.
Right. Yeah, that was an interesting moment. I felt a little bit more of that subtext with the Bill Murray interview.
Did you?
Yeah. The idea of his vision for Groundhog Day and Ramis's vision of Groundhog Day being much more of a romantic, sentimental comedy type, and Bill Murray was looking at a whole different, and the way he couched it seemed like you could tell that they were just two trains running just opposite directions.
Well, that is one of the stories that I heard when I was doing my research to try to find why the friendship splintered. And that is one of the stories that's out there, that they had two different visions for Groundhog Day, and one of them wanted it to be funny and the other wanted it to be serious, and that was what a lot of the fighting was about. I don't think that was necessarily all of it, because I've read some other things too, but Murray does talk about that here.
And I was inferring it from listening to the interview, but even though Murray acknowledges that Ramis's direction was correct because the movie worked out for everyone involved, there is still a sense of, and maybe I'm guessing, that he was not completely content with the overall product, because I have a feeling that Murray wanted a little bit more of his vision into Groundhog Day. I could be wrong, but that's the gist I got from the interview that you guys are going to listen to right now.
Well, collaboration is compromise.
Yeah.
I mean, we're experiencing that right now with each other.
Right. You have to work with a much lesser soul.
As do you.
Yes. We're trying to out horrible each other, folks. But
all right, getting back to Bill Murray. So context is important. You have to remember that in 1993, he was still known almost exclusively as a comedy actor. He had made a serious film, The Razor's Edge, back in 1984, and people didn't know what to make of it, so he went right back to making goofy comedies. And that was his persona. He hadn't yet made Rushmore or Lost in Translation, which established him as a more serious actor. Back in 1993, nobody thought of him that way. This was still the era, remember, of What About Bob and Ghostbusters 2. And I think you can sort of hear that in this interview, where the Junketeers are laughing a little bit too loud when he's jokey because, you know, he's this goofy comedy guy. And they sound a little bit off balance when he's introspective. Nowadays, we all know that this is who he really is, but back then, I think nobody did. And that wasn't, I think, what people were expecting from him.
I remember as a kid just watching Siskel and Ebert when at the movie special, spotlighting how awesome Bill Murray was. And they were talking about, like you said, they were talking about What About Bob, and then he's much more, he's not just the guy from Caddyshack, and they were just talking about, I don't even know if Groundhog Day was even featured in that special, but I knew way back then that by Groundhog Day, he had a lot of, he was more than just a comedic actor. But I think a lot of people, to your point, pretty much said, that's Bill Murray for Meatballs, Caddyshack, Stripes, Ghostbusters, that's it.
Yeah, Scrooged. You know, that was his thing. He hasn't made a goofy comedy in how long?
Right.
It's been a while. He makes serious stuff now. And that changes how people think of him. Now, one of the things you're going to hear in this junket is people in the room laughing out loud. And this is taboo. My guess is they were probably getting glares for it, because this completely broke the rules, but they were either ignoring them or else they didn't know what the glares meant. Sometimes we would get print people thrown into the room with us, and they wouldn't know they're not supposed to do that.
They would get a good talking to after the interview ended by one of our peers?
Yes, afterwards, but you couldn't really stop in the middle while Bill Murray's sitting there. You couldn't just stop and lecture the guy because the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
So you're going to hear some laughing out loud. You don't hear that all that often, but you will hear it here, and it's a no-no. So here we go. Bill Murray.
Bill Murray?
actually been here for 2 hours, so this isn't new.
I've been here for a while too.
You
probably been here earlier.
Yeah, you've been the prime subject of everybody who's come through. So.
Yeah, we
This
know all
is a
about
cool
you.
room. Oh, well, so we've done this.
Go.
Hi, I'm Bill.
Barry Kane.
Hi.
Nice
good
to meet you.
Louise Blinker, hi.
Hello.
John Harkness.
Hi, John.
Hi, Chef Morgan. Hi.
Hi, Chef.
Wayne Lee.
Hi.
Ian Cadell, Vancouver. Hi.
How you doing? I feel like I've got Liz Taylor's brooch, a bracelet or something. Not her bust, but a bracelet anyway. Her necklace.
The tropical disease.
Huh? Well, I was down in Florida, and some of this is makeup too. I was doing it on TV, but I was in Florida. They got the sun down there.
Yeah, they do.
Florida.
Anybody for a Tic Tac?
Oh, to bring it up for
Sure,
everybody?
right over
I
here.
do. Why don't we just, you can
It's a nice
put
thing about
that
the Tic
all
Tac.
around
All right,
the
take one and
table.
pass them. They are noisy.
Thank you.
It's all right.
Take one past them.
Bill, the idea of you actually going to Punxsutawney to see Groundhog Day seems almost as funny as the movie, but is that, in fact, was it a wild and crazy experience? Or?
Well, I tried to be undercover. I actually went undercover in Punxsutawney, which was not impossible because it was so cold. The people were covered. I mean, just their heads, their faces were covered. But I tried to go undercover, but I did get spotted because when you stand by the fire, you know, it's like St. Peter. They didn't catch him. You know, the Romans didn't spot Peter until he stood by the fire. You know, hey, you, aren't you a friend of his? But you stand by that fire. It's really fun, the Punxsutawney Groundhog Day Festival. I highly recommend it. And if you're ever in Pittsburgh on the 1st, drive over because it's really, it's really, really fun.
Is it like getting religion or something? I mean, is it like,
Focus.
No, it's yeah, the focus, but it's not like, it's just fun. I don't know how to.
What makes it fun?
How else to describe it? Well, you go to this, you're driving and you're really out in the, I mean, there's just snow on the ground and it's dark and you're driving. This is my experience anyway. You know, you see an occasional tree and the roads are like this. There's no straight roads. I mean, it's not straight to get anywhere. And you go through a town called D-U-B-O-I-S, which you think is Dubois, but is Du Bois. And you end up in Punxsutawney, and it's this town, and it's sort of like there's not really a gas station open at night, and it's really small. And you can't imagine this is where you are, but you find out you got to go up the hill, and you go up the hill, and then there's hundreds of people up on top of this hill. And there's music playing, and they're playing like Beatles songs, old Beatles songs, and everybody's singing, and you know, Beach Boys. It's like a party. People appear to be drinking. I didn't really ask a lot of questions, but they appear to be. It's like a hayride kind of feeling, and it's freezing cold, like stomping your feet, freezing cold. And the stage with the groundhog, where the groundhog is, just like ours, and they have a huge bonfire. Really big, so big that you go over to it and you stand with your back to it, and all of a sudden you go, my pants are on fire, you know, and then you turn around and you stay, and my face is melting, you know, so it's that hot. Then you go back in and sing more songs, and all the time up on the stage, these guys in the black hats anybody can come up and take the microphone and be like, hi, I'm Jerry Martin from Lancaster, and our town may be a dump, but we know how to party! You know, stuff like that. And people just get up and say anything. Anything. And it all goes on for hours. Anything. And nobody cares. There's no judgment. It's like, and these guys are in charge, but people come out and act like, you know, they're bombed and they're just saying silly stuff. And it's all fun.
If the groundhog, they just pulled him out of his little box and they held him up, and apparently he had made his decision.
Well, that's part of the magic, isn't it? Well, he makes his decision. I mean, they're extrasensory. They know. I mean, the groundhog knows if the sun's out. You got to know that. You got to believe that. But I can't tell you everything because you got to go and see it. I mean, you really have to go and see it. It's really fun.
You obviously like taking risks. We've seen that with so many of your movies, particularly Razor's Edge. But this movie is really quite special in terms of its innovations. And for any actor, was there any point where you got nervous and said, maybe I just can't pull this off?
Well, I never thought I couldn't pull it off, but I thought maybe I didn't want to. It was cold outside in Illinois, and I got cranky, and I could only drink so much minestrone soup, you know, before I just think I should be, you know, down in Florida. This is nuts. You know, I should be like a greenskeeper down in Florida, which is what I should be doing. I should be cutting greens down there or working on a golf course. The thing that comes closest to answering your question in a way which might be more satisfying to you is I thought this movie should be more of a comedy. I thought it really should, given that setup, the interesting thing about Danny Rubin's script, is this setup, this situation, that you could do. There were almost limitless comic possibilities, but Harold wanted to do more of a romantic story, so we disagreed on that, about what the balance of it should be. And so we would shoot a lot of things, but Harold always had in his mind that this is what he wanted to make, and because he is the director and the film is all in cans over at his house, he got to decide. So that's what it was, and it works. He was right that the movie works like this, yeah.
So are you ready to be America's next romantic hero?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't know. The underwear ad thing has been taken, so I don't know what to do.
Have they called you though? Should they?
No, they have. If they call me asking about underwear, I'm not going to return the calls. But I don't know. It's nice to do a movie that people like. I think women are going to like the movie, and men and romantic people will like the movie. I don't think people most movies that are so-called romantic, I get queasy watching some of them, But I like a romantic story when when it works great.
Almost every one of your predecessors sat in that chair and talked about the duality of your nature. For want of a better word, I looked it up before I came. The comic, perhaps brash side, the serious plus the spiritual inside, the maybe serious on the front, gentle inside. Can you talk a little bit about that at all?
Nobody mentioned like the ornery, the mean, the
they were real
bitter.
Kind.
They were, huh?
Yeah.
Well, there's duality for you.
Are you a walking contradiction? Is that really what it's all about?
Well, yeah, sure. I'm just like you. But yeah, I guess I'm a contradiction. I think everybody is. You try to lean one way or another. You try to lean that way and hope that that gets you going that way. Well, it gets you motoring that way. They say walking is just leaning and giving a little push, and the rest of it takes almost no energy. But the trick is to just lean a little bit and go, and then you can do it.
Are you getting more serious about life, though, than in those good old days?
Well, I was always serious about life, but it's just what aspect of it you're going for. I've always been serious about life. I like to have a good time. I don't think I've had as much fun as I've had recently. And I don't want to sound like I'm born again or anything, but just in the last few months, I've had more fun than I've had in a while. And not even wild, goofy fun. Just because I'm making more of an effort at things. I think I'm a really lazy guy. If I didn't have if I didn't have to have a job every once in a while, if I didn't do movies, I would do nothing. Really, I'm not motivated. I'm not a self-starter. I was watching a thing on. It was what's Jim Arness's brother's name? Peter Graves. I think it was Peter Graves or somebody, but they were doing Howard Hughes.
It's a biography.
Yeah.
A&E, yeah.
And it was A&E, right. And they're doing Howard Hughes, and they're talking like there's something wrong with this guy. And I'm going, wait a minute, that's me. Hey, likes to lie in bed, watches some TV, lets his nails go long, isn't too concerned whether he takes a bath, lets his hair go. Wait a minute. You got a problem with that, Mr. Graves?
So how do people like you and Howard become successful?
Well, I think we become successful before we know what we're really like. I think we we sort of get born in the right place, or we bump into the right people, so that we get, whatever skill or whatever talent we have is fortunately, it's like the seed that falls on. Sounds kind of biblical today, but the seed that falls on fertile ground bursts out. I was lucky to be born in Illinois and the land of Lincoln, and to start the second city and meet, John and Harold and Brian, and live with Brian, and then, these jobs just sort of bump up. They just stack up. Well, there were other people who were in the same place that haven't been as lucky. So yeah, there's some talent, but. That talent can only take you so far in any respect, and then you got to do something different. I know, and you know, people that are in the same field as we are that had more talent. You know, when I was 20, there were people that were a lot better than I was who just for some reason didn't make it beyond that level. You know, and it's about what kind of effort you give. You know, and you know, not to bring it back to the movie, but like there are nicer people in Punxsutawney in the movie than the guy I am. You know, they're nicer people, better people, but I ended up having a happy day because I made an effort. You know, I made a real effort. I mean, it took me months, but I figured out how to make that effort. Well, it's the same as making it over years or decades, but I mean, you got to figure out what you want and how to make an effort and not get depressed when, you know, not react when it doesn't go right for you.
What do you want, Bill?
Well, I think I want to write plays. Yeah.
Really? What
kind
of plays? Tell us.
Well, that's the question. Is I got to figure that out too. I mean, once I know now that it's what I always wanted to do, but I got distracted from it, you know, and I sort of ended up at this press junket, so to speak, you know. I mean, and now I'm not writing a play today, but I do have a typewriter in my hotel room, you know. It's like. And now I got to start writing plays and figure out what it is that comes out. But I mean, that's something I wanted to do since I was, you know, 17.
Stage or screen or both? Or?
Stage. I mean, I started on the stage, and I really liked the stage. But what happens is, you know, some sort of Peter principle where the guys half decent on the stage, let's put them on TV. You know, guys half decent on TV, let's put them in the movies. Guys half decent in the movies, let's run them for the Senate. You know. So since I know now that I can't run for the Senate, given my past and the stories that'll come up, I'm going to start over again. Yeah, I'm going to sort of go back to what I was thinking.
Do you have an idea for a play right now that you're excited about?
Well, I think that I've written things down over years. I have an extensive file collection that is pieces of paper. On envelopes, napkins, newspapers, magazines stolen out of airplanes, you know, stuff like that. I don't think I have a real idea, but I have I think you just have to sit down and do it. I mean, there's no idea. I'd say yes, it's a story of a boy and his dog. You know, I don't have the idea in my head what I'd like to do. I just know that if I don't do that, I won't do what I want to do, and then I will never really feel like I made the right effort. You know, the effort that you know I was sort of wanted to do a long time and gets pushed away.
You've also been described, I think, as a perfectionist, and I guess the image you have of perfectionists is they don't have as much fun as everybody else because they're always worrying about getting it right. Is that you? Or?
Who said that perfectionist thing?
All of them.
Really? Well. You know, I don't mind that. You know, it's one of those things that, like, he's an actor that's difficult to work with. Where is this guy? I want to work with him, you know. I feel like if somebody who's a perfectionist, I kind of like the idea of perfectionist. I mean, I know there's a problem when they write books about it, that you got a problem, you know, and I had someone give me a book saying, so you're a perfectionist, what can we do now, kind of thing, you know. It had too many aqua colors on it for me to take it too seriously, but at least there's somewhere to go with that, you know. You've got to have some sort of ego to destroy, you know, or to shape or remold or something. If you don't have an ego or some, you know, then, you know, it's hard to build that up. You know, it's like an actor who's over the top. Give me that guy. I can beat him down. You know, I can make it fit. But an actor who doesn't give you the juice and doesn't know how to give you the juice, you gotta, you know, put him to sleep. Because
how can you be lazy and be a perfectionist?
It's part of being late. Part of it, I guess, it's probably because I'm such a perfectionist that when I see something that I can't make perfect, I have no interest in doing it, you know, or something. I don't know. I mean, we need my medical opinion here, but.
But yet you're a golfer, which is a sport that you drive for perfection, and no one, well, maybe 3 guys.
Well, that's a practice, though. It's like a practice. I mean, the thing about golf that's interesting as opposed to other sports. I mean, I think a lot of people think golf is like an old man's fuddy-duddy disease kind of sport, you know. But the thing that's interesting about golf is there is an ideal. There is par. You know, that is the ideal. And so you have a standard to measure yourself against. I mean, you know, you and I can go play one-on-one basketball and, you know, you'll beat me 16-11 or something, you know. What was the standard? What did we do? You know, it was just an isolated two trees falling against each other, you know. And you don't sort of see your own development because you're an indeterminate standard, and so am I that way. But if we have a standard, you know, if there's a standard that someone sets that's higher than your own, then you have something to shoot for. I mean, like Michael Mann is this guy, this nightmare director from hell. I call this guy, I say, Mike, I read this article about you in the LA Times. What a prick you are. Have you got anything for me? You know what I mean? I mean, this is a guy who wants, it's got to be right, you know? I mean, this is interesting to me, you know? I mean, the movie business is and it's so much detail, you know? It's so much about detail.
When you get sent a screenplay, do you assume that they're going to allow a lot of latitude with you because that's why they would want you to add something to it, to improvise in the screenplay?
Well, I can answer that a couple ways. I mean, there's a lot of scripts they send to me because they want somebody to improvise, you know, and you can read the script and say, this is a cry for help, you know. Or you can say the other thing, which is, if you have an improvement, which is the way I take it, if someone has an improvement, a person that knows the difference will say, of course, that's right, you know. Like when I directed Quick Change with Howard Franklin, you know, we were both first-time directors. We were working with Woody Allen's crew. You know, these guys have made lots of movies. You know, they know their stuff. And they were excited to be involved because Woody's a guy who knows exactly, you know, he's the deal, and, you know, but they were able to help us do things, and they'd, you know, if, like Jimmy Mazzola, the prop guy, says, Bill, you should, this and the thing, you know, I go, oh, right, okay, I get it. You know, I know that Jimmy Mazzola knows a lot of stuff, you know. If somebody knows something, it doesn't matter if he's the property master or the wig maker or whatever else. If he's the guy, you know, and he's right, the people that know, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like a good editor of copy, you know. If you send in your copy and an editor takes out a couple sentences and it's right, you know that he's made the right choice, you know. It's not arbitrary. You know, you only get into problems where people get arbitrary. An editor says, oh, I don't like this about Martha Ray, or, you know, whatever. I never got her, you know. That's arbitrary, that's subjective. But
can comedy be that way? Because there's probably some things that people just haven't got what you do.
You mean that's subjective, that people don't get, or?
Possibly. I mean, does it affect you?
That people don't laugh at certain things? I mean, it always impresses me when someone picks a line out. You know, people say, hey, I loved it when you said something. And they pick a line out that's really obscure, that nobody got, you know. And I just go, ooh, because this is a guy, you know, this is a girl, this is somebody that got that one, you know. It makes you feel good, like, because it seems like people only remember the broader strokes, you know, and that will always be the way. But when somebody gets one of the little ones, it's like, great, there was something for everybody, you know. So, and that's the way it is. I mean, even I learned that in the theater. It's like, if you do a show of sketches, and there's 15 or 20 of them, there's one, and you know who's not laughing. You can see them, you can feel them, you know where they are. And so you can't go right at this person because they're tough. So you're playing it to where they're getting it. You're playing it to where they're getting it. You know, and it's either not funny enough for this person, which is usually the case, you know, so this person wants a certain thing, has got a certain funny bone. And all of a sudden, because you're not playing to that person, they know you're not playing to them. They know you're not schmuck baiting them, and they sort of respect that, so they let you slide. You know, they go, okay, this isn't my stuff, but this guy's not schmuck baiting me. He's not making me, he's not like hitting me in a tub and hitting himself in the face with a chicken or something. And when you finally get it, and they laugh, you can look at them, and it's like, there you go. Okay, I didn't quit, and didn't you know, splatter fat on my face or anything. But that's it, you know, and that's. I don't know what the point I'm making is, but you reminded me of something that I felt very strongly when I worked in the theater, and it's the same in movies where people pick out the line that you like, that not everybody even noticed.
Do you pick out lines, whether they're from your movies? Do you ever slip into character again? So you've played some memorable characters, or will you pick out to another person other lines from someone else's movie?
Well, Let's see.
Like when you're on the golf course, will you ever start slipping in?
Into the Caddyshack thing? Well, everybody does it. Everybody does it. It's really scary. I mean, you go on a golf course, and people in that world, it is the greatest golf film ever made. You know, can you close that because it's loud out there? Just for a second, Mira.
Could you restate that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's Caddyshack was the greatest golf film ever made, and so when you go into the golf world, a golf course. I am golf royalty. I mean, it sounds insane, but I am golf royalty because I am in the greatest golf film ever made. I can go to any golf course in the world, knock wood, or in America certainly, and say, I'd like to play golf. And they say, we will take you out. I get treated like the Duchess of Windsor. And anything goes. Anything goes because someone spoke to the golf world. Someone spoke to them, and I am their voice, and Harold too, and Rodney too, and Ted Knight, bless his soul. But.
Speaking of Caddyshack, with Caddyshack and Groundhog Day, is there going to be like a third rodent film to complete a trilogy?
Yes, it is a trilogy. It is a trilogy, and in this one, the son of the groundhog comes back to avenge the father's death.
Can you speak about bonding with the groundhog, or did you risk your life to drive the car with that groundhog?
Well, I honestly did because he bit me very badly twice, about 3 weeks apart, and it didn't heal. And the vet would not give me any kind of rabies shot because they don't know if groundhogs give rabies. And I said, what? He said, well, what if I get rabies? He said, well, then we will know. And, it's just very puzzling. So I was kind of half hoping I'd get rabies so I could go home. I was freezing.
Bill, everyone in here has described you as spiritual. What is it that you believe?
Oh, that's the setup, isn't it? Boy.
10 words or less.
Yeah, right.
30 seconds.
Well, it's always... Well, I think you have to, we're talking about what you want, I think what I believe this week, and it's not in contradiction to anything I've believed before, but I think that knowing what you want is your first step, and that, I used to say, well, we're here for a higher purpose. We're not put on this planet to eat and drink. We're here to do something more important. But that's really the forest for the trees, and it's the littlest. You got to get a running start to get out there, you have to get some momentum up, and success breeds success. All these things, you have to make an effort. Practice makes perfect. All these things sort of add up to some sort of infomercial about effort. That there is a clever way to deal with disappointment. There is a satisfying way to transform everything that comes to you into forward motion. There will be made an automobile or a car or a spaceship that exists on the fuel of thought, human emotions, gas, ethanol, mud, cow flop. Anything that you get, you can use to take you forward.
Is there a discipline that you adhere to? Any particular discipline?
Well, yeah, no. I think that they're all legit. I think that they're all legit. There are many rooms in the mansion, and part of what I do involves everything. Part of what I do involves many. So. It's really about attention, your attention.
Paying attention?
Yes. And you're paying attention to yourself. So if you're paying attention, you're not only here, but you're there, You can be in the present, you can be in the past, and you're in the future, It's your only connection to the past and the future is if you're in the present. So if you're paying attention, you can hear what other people do. You're open to what people say or think, and you can take it and do anything with it. You can react to it, or you can. Oh no, no, that is a resort in Jamaica.
Chris Elliott says you're ethereal. Does that fit with what you see yourself as?
Ethereal, golly. Golly. Chris said that about me. Well, ethereal. Well, I guess I think it's part of denying, you gotta deny your mind sometimes, you know. You've gotta deny, you gotta treat your body like a slave, you know, like dirt. You've gotta make your body obey, and that holds you in one place, and that sort of makes the top of your head available. So it is ethereal. You're open to the ether, and what the original meaning meant. But if your mind's not cluttered up with all the impressions, and you're taking your attention and putting it on your body, and then there's more room for your mind to operate. It doesn't get cluttered up.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, so that was Bill Murray. Some very deep thoughts there at the end. But can we please talk about the phrase schmuck baiting?
Right.
He said it 3 times. I have no idea what it means, but I do have this overwhelming feeling that I probably spent most of my teenage years doing it.
Again, visuals for a podcast are quite a thing.
Yeah, a little not safe for work. But anyway, so he talked about wanting to start writing plays. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think he has. Do you know?
No.
Or who knows, maybe he's written some, but they've never been produced. But hey, he did play a playwright in Tootsie, so at least there's that.
Good callback. I just like that section in the interview when he talks about, hey, you know, some people think of maybe him as a comedic guy or funny guy, but people are complex. Even when that moment when someone said that he's a really nice person on set or something like that, he goes, well, you know, it really depends. We're all complex people, and that's what the great thing about listening to this interview. You realize all the good, interesting Bill Murray work that's yet to come from Groundhog Day. The wistful part about this episode is, like you said, it's the end of a friendship, and the price was, well, that's what happens when you make a really wonderful movie that stands the test of time. You know, that could be it. All I'm saying is sometimes all's well, it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well sometimes.
Yeah. Well, at least they did get to talk one last time.
Yes.
On his deathbed, and I understand that they put a lot of that behind them. That they kind of worked some things out. I mean, no one else was in the room. We don't know what happened, what was said.
Yeah.
But if you remember, shortly after Ramis died, Bill Murray appeared on the Oscars, and he gave a little tribute.
Beautiful tribute. Very short, nice thing on Harold Ramis.
Kind of dropped his name within the nominees, I think.
Yeah, that was really wonderful.
So that wraps it up for Groundhog Day.
Yes, it does. I just wish a little bit regarding for the purposes of our show, Matt, I wish we got a little bit in the future. We get a little bit more animated about things. We need a little bit more. I don't know. We're just a little bit too much of a live action kind of thing, you know?
Okay, well, sorry.
I'm trying, folks, with the track. You know,
Greg, I guess you're just gonna have to be disappointed with the quality of our show.
Yes,
all right, fine. Doing my best, but whatever.
We need to grab something. Maybe just unearth something from a crypt or...
All right, I actually do know what you're talking about. Next episode, we are going to be interviewing characters. This is something that didn't happen all that often, but when it did, it was really, really special. When they would set the characters up, if they were puppets or if they were voice actors or whatever, and they would have us talk to the characters rather than to the actors. So all of our questions had to inhabit that world. And that, again, it didn't happen that often, so we don't have a lot to share from that, but I wanted to kind of put all of those together into one episode, interviewing characters. In the meantime, we hope that you guys will check out our webpage, mattandgregpodcast.com. We hope that you'll check out Facebook page, which is facebook.com/mattandgreg.
I keep on saying this, listeners, thank you so much for the support on the show. We value your feedback, and it's not just a 2-person show with a bunch of archival or great interviews.
No, it's a 3-person show, and we edit that third guy out.
Yes, we did.
That's why there's all these lapses where it makes no sense at all.
Listeners, you are the third co-host of the show, so we want to hear your feedback and input on our ever-evolving universe.
Wow, way to wrap that up with a tiny bow.
Until next time.
Bye, everybody.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.